All right, hey everyone. So we're going to be looking at integrated look and rehab and movement thought processes. So what we're sharing today is rather than a technique as such, this is my thought process. Okay, so over 21, 22 years of training people and working with clients, this is kind of like the culmination of all of it. What I've come to as the best way to look at treating clients who have movement problems and or pain. And like I literally even use this stuff today in the gym as a member, just talking to other members to help them overcome certain things. So once you know this stuff, you become very, very useful. And when you become very useful, you have a lot of people who want to, pay you money. I signed up 2 members from the gym that I go to as a member this week so far. So this is like, it's a really, really cool thing that you can do. You just need to get confident with it. So the first model that I always consider when I'm doing any kind of rehab is the biopsychosocial model. I've talked about it a bit. I don't ever really go fully down the rabbit hole of it because if you look at that picture, you can see how deep the rabbit hole goes. So all those things there on that picture are all the contributing factors that contribute to musculoskeletal pain or the experience of pain. So this is where when someone ever says pain is just one thing, this one exercise you must do, all those types of claims that we see, it's not really it, unfortunately. Now, does that mean that those interventions don't have a place? Absolutely not. It's not saying that at all. It's just never going to be the whole solution. So this is where you see people who will get stuck in a model, such as the Athletic Truth Group model. I actually like their model. I like what they do. I think they really do really good progressive overload and really good exposure type stuff to training. But they miss out on a lot of this stuff here. So a lot of people do get great results. A lot of people don't get good results. And it's because of a lack of integration of all this. So the biopsychosocial model is a holistic approach which considers your biology, your psychology, and social factors in your rehab and movement. So key components to look at, and I'm going to give you some practicals now. First one is biology or biomechanics, tissue healing, strength, mobility, biomechanics. Anyone who says these things don't matter for pain is wrong. Okay, it just means they don't matter all the time. So if we're going to use an example of posture, it's been a long-standing belief in the fitness industry that posture can influence pain or cause pain. Now, some people have absolutely terrible posture, but no pain. So that basically means that it doesn't invalidate that posture can cause pain. It just means that posture doesn't cause pain for everyone. Okay. Same with strength, same with mobility, etc. There can be people with terrible mobility who have no pain. There can be people who are super weak with pain, and really, really strong people also experience pain. What I look at it as a way that I kind of look through all this type of stuff is I want to kind of consider which one of these are probably pertinent or relevant to that particular client. I look at tissue healing as a really important one because tissue healing will help you understand, what tissue you're working at, roughly how long someone's going to get better. So I posted a testimonial just before a 6. He's had a nice recomp in the work that we've been doing together, why we healed his disc pathology. Okay, so with his disc pathology, I knew that he wouldn't be lifting heavy for a period of, say, 6 to 8 weeks, simply because the tissue needed that time to heal. Okay, a lot of people in the psychosocial sphere will say that that is actually just creating more fear avoidance, fear avoidance behaviors and increased perception of pain. When in reality, if there is still a tissue an issue with the tissues, that sounds good, doesn't it? If they go into it too early, you can actually exacerbate the problem. So a lot of people will always think of, oh, it's all this type of stuff and not thinking that tissue healing actually matters. And it really matters a ton. So when we look at this here, tissue healing, we know that nutrition makes a difference. We know that inflammation makes a difference. We know that rest and recovery and regeneration can all make a difference. And this is where people will use things like curcumin or BPC 157 in their healing protocols because it accelerates the rate of tissue healing, whether it's via like the actual cells being able to heal faster and or reducing inflammation. So the social, we'll go into that first, is lifestyle, work demand, support system. They basically all influence how we experience pain on a day-to-day model. And they also they also influence how much recoverability our system has. So Eden, for example, is very happy because I've given her a deload because the training demands that she was getting were currently exceeding her recovery demands, and her work demands have increased because she's got more clients coming in. So it's a win-win. So what we do is we give her a temporary drop in training demands to allow her tissue to heal better. Okay, so there's lots of different ways that you can look at it. So you need to look at these things here when you consider the influences on someone's healing. Let's say Mark did his knee, and let's assume that Mark only sleeps 3 hours a night. Okay, he's probably not going to heal as fast as someone who, like Angus, who sleeps 9 hours a night and has one nap a day, for example, because the lifestyle that they lead will be very, very different. Okay, if someone is in construction, they will heal differently to someone who's working in an office job, because the person in construction has to goes through much more wear and tear and taking their joints through a range of motion, and the people who are, you know, doing office jobs, they are a lot more stagnant. So it can lead to different like rehab approaches as well. So on Friday at the seminar I'm giving, which is about like the physiological responses to training, we're going to talk about something like helping someone sleep. You give someone magnesium glycinate, or you give someone lemon balm. They're both going to have the same outcome of helping someone improve their sleep quality, but they're going to do it via very different mechanisms. Okay, so we kind of apply the same concept here. You can have a person who has knee pain who's in construction, and the person who has the same knee pain who's in working a white collar job and sitting at a desk all day, and you can do totally different rehab protocols for them for the same injury due to the demands that they put for their body through their work demands. So this model basically allows us to make better decisions based on getting away from protocols and looking at, all right, cool, who's the person in front of me and what do they have? And then the psychology part of it is actually how we kind of communicate to clients and the actual individual in front of us experiencing said pain. So we all probably know someone who can get absolutely beat the hell up and they don't feel anything. They just keep going through the day. An example of that would be my brother. He put an axe through his knee once, a good, like, nearly an inch gash just above his knee, like right through. He was chopping something for work, and I was there on site at the time. I was helping out, and he just glued it back together himself with work glue, which was so wrong, but he just glued it back together and kept on working. So he has a very low, he has a very high pain tolerance and a very low experience of pain. Yet you can have other people who, like, can get a tiny little cut and they'll pass out from the pain. It doesn't mean they're weaker. It just means that they have a higher degree of nociceptive sensitivity. So these things do make a difference, and these will influence how we talk to our clients. So if you have a client who has a high degree of nociceptive sensibility, you may actually have to encourage them to work through small amounts of pain to be better, to get better, and you may need to, really slowly progress them based on their needs. On the flip side, you've got someone who can just power through pain and just kind of ignores it. You might need to actually slow them down, simply because they'll just keep on going even though it hurts. And you'll see that in, say, CrossFitters, for example. They'll just keep on going no matter how much it hurts. Now, fear avoidance behaviors are also something that we need to deal with, and for a long-term resolution of all problems, because let's say someone hurts their back deadlifting, what's the likelihood they want to go deadlifting again? It's extremely low, because what they'll do is they'll associate the fact that the deadlift caused pain, and when the deadlift caused pain, deadlifting as an event causes pain. So we need to kind of get people to get away from fear avoidance behaviors to grow, to improve their movement vocabulary. So this model is very, very complex. What we just need to kind of remember is what are all the factors that influences someone, and how can I change my decisions from that? This is why when anyone ever messages me, what do I do for this situation for said client or themselves? I don't really have an answer straight away. I need to ask more questions. Of course, I want to make sure that, I get everything to give the right answer. Now, the next thing we look at with pain is load management. And this is very, very in vogue now. So biopsychosocial and load management are the most in vogue models of dealing with pain. And load management is basically balancing training, recovery, and stress to optimize performance and minimize your injury risk. Now, if we're looking at this, there's a couple of key factors. Acute versus chronic workload. Let's just use running as an example here, because running seems to be very popular at the moment. I don't know if anyone's noticed that. Everyone seems to be a runner now. It just irritates me a little bit, but, each to their own. With running, a lot of people start running because it's in vogue and it's social and all that type of stuff. You can talk, and you're seeing a lot of acute injuries because people are going from zero, like not running at all, to then running a couple of 10Ks per week. That's a massive increase in the overall workload. So it's not that they're running wrong or they've got weak tissues or anything like that. It's more the fact that, you know, they're just overdoing it and they've overdone their workload. You wouldn't go from squatting 100 kilos to 200 kilos in the next week because it would be overdoing chronic workload. And we would all understand why that person got injured. But running it doesn't really click for a lot of people, but that's another discussion. Progressive overload versus overtraining. Overtraining, very hard to get. It's probably going to be more under recovery and monitoring fatigue and recovery. Now, a couple of strategies we can use here for load management. We can track training volume and intensity, making sure people aren't going to do too far too soon. Using RPE and monitoring that and implementing deload weeks. I have a preferred strategy for that, okay, compared to this, which is rather than actually worrying about implementing deload RPE and tracking training volume intensity, it's using good programming to begin with. Because if the program, doesn't matter how good you are at tracking your volume intensity, if the program to begin with sucks, that's a problem. But it's actually looking at how the load is managed. Okay, and this is a different concept. So let's imagine we're doing deadlifts. Okay. And we can easily use a trap bar versus a barbell deadlift as an example of this, of how load is managed. Who finds deadlifting 100 kilos easier on a straight bar compared to, or easier on a trap bar compared to a straight bar?
Yeah.
It's piss easy compared to it, right? Because the load is actually shifted more into the quads. So the load is managed over a greater amount of tissue. If the load is managed over a great amount of tissue, it means the stress is dissipated across more sections of the body. There's less likely for anyone to be injured in that. So we often see that people will train athletes with trap bar deadlifts versus barbell deadlifts because the load is easy to manage. My argument for that is that means technique becomes even more important. Because if technique is done correctly, it shifts the load into the tissues that we want to train and get stronger. And people say there's no proof for this. It's like, I don't know how you find proof for it, but everyone has kind of observed injuries when people are lifting like assholes. People doing terrible form, and you see things go at that time because the tissue that they're loading isn't the right tissue. So, for example, if I did a deadlift with a really rounded lumbar spine, kyphotic lumbar spine, the tissues that are going to get the most load are not going to be my glutes, my hamstrings, the quads for the bottom part, and then my back maintaining an isometric contraction. It's going to be my disc. My disc is where the load's going to go to. And what's going to be more vulnerable to injury? My disc or my muscles? It's going to be the disc. So load management, people say it's always just about the volume that you do. No, it's about how you do the volume is just as important in my opinion. So, and we all see this as well when you have someone come to you. Every personal trainer has seen this, which it just blows my mind that it's still a thing. Who's had a client had like some form of pain, either hip or knee or whatever, when they're doing a barbell back squat with their feet flat, and that disappears as soon as you elevate the ankles.
Yeah.
Every coach in the history of time has had that happen because what happens is elevating the ankles shifts the load forward and allows it to be distributed over a greater amount of muscle. Okay, fantastic. It shows that load management is not just where it is not just the volume that you do, but it's also where you manage the load. And if I could change one thing about the fitness industry, that would be it. That would be the one thing that I want to do. It would make my day. So these are more like our global thought processes. The biopsychosocial model, we think about all these things when someone needs rehab or movement stuff as a way we create our program, and then our load management as our way of monitoring their overall volume and certain things that we can look for. Now we've gotten to that point. Now we need to look at what actual tissues are being loaded too much and what are being loaded too little. And the reason why I really emphasize this right now is we need to have a tool to actually make our clients feel better. So it's all good saying, oh, your pain is influenced by all these things on the chart. Look how smart I am. God. And then asking them how they feel empowered and all that type of stuff. But if we don't give our client a quick win and give them a tool to actually immediately alleviate their pain somewhat, we are not going to get the outcome that we want from our clients. Okay. And they're not going to be happy with it. So we need to get these quick wins to get buy-in to the rest of the program. And then everything else in these two models works more effectively because people will buy in. It's the placebo effect personified. So I like to use the joint by joint approach, movement slings and fascial lines, posture, deviations and the impact, the Yanda approach, which you guys know, but it's just a different word, and then looking at strength training in a different way. So let's go through these. It's going to be a little bit quicker because everyone here on this call has some form of experience with this. So let's nail this now. Joint by joint, great cook Mike Boyle, good conversation. It's basically the body alternates between joints who need mobility and stability. Foot stable, ankle mobile, knee stable, hip mobile, low back stable, thoracic mobile, and dysfunctions in one can affect everything. So when we're looking at a client who has pain, we've looked at everything else. What we want to do is see, do any of these joints lack the requirement? So for example, using my back analogy, cool, does the lumbar spine lack stability when someone's doing a deadlift? Are they rounding too much? Cool, if that's the case, we need to generate that. Now, Noxie, your pain, your injury is a load management function because you went in the football season and you upped your running volume and everything else, and every athlete has ever done that. So for you, load management was important, but it also allows us to now tidy up all these things under that with all the rehab stuff. And when you tidy up these things and get better foundation here, your load management capacity goes up. So it doesn't make you a bad person because, you know, I tore both groins and I tore both obliques doing basketball due to shitty load management. It wasn't biomechanics, it was shitty load management. Everyone's done it in sport, so we don't have to feel bad because, you know, it's overall more of a net positive than it is a net negative. So with these guys, we always look at this first as our simplest tool that we can use to affect change. Thank you. So if someone has a problem with their back for the deadlift, is it a hip problem? Is it a hip problem? Is it a lumbar spine problem? If they have shoulder pain, is it a scapular problem? Is it a thoracic spine problem? Is it a glenohumeral joint problem? There's lots of different ways that we can look at that. And if you can do this, it gives you a lot of answers for the clients straight away and gives them something actionable that they can do that day, which is the most important thing. Now, we've gone over these a bit in our last couple of calls. We've got the movement slings and fascial lines. So the way I always like to look at it is the movement slings create movement, the fascial slings absorb movement. Okay, so we need to look at, with most people's pain, if it's happening in the movement, is it in the acceleration phase or the deceleration phase? I'm going to touch on this a lot more on Friday's call where we talk about the mechanisms of everything, because if we have the mechanisms of how things work, we can then create better solutions for people very, very quickly. So for the movement slings, we've got the external oblique sling, which is the external obliques opposite side adductors. If we've got the posterior oblique sling, that's the lat dorsi and glute max with the thoracolumbar fascia. We have the lateral sling, the glute med and quadratus lumborum, and the deep longitudinal sling, along with the fascial trains. So we've gone through stuff on how to train these in previous seminars. I would look at these secondly after the joint by joint. So does the client, have some obvious deviations in how they walk or how they move? And can we train that? Now from here, we're going to smash through it now and finish it off strong. Postural deviations and impact. So as I said earlier, posture doesn't necessarily mean that just because someone has a postural deviation doesn't mean they will get pain. A postural deviation also doesn't mean that they won't get pain. So it is individualized. Some people can have shitty posture and have no pain. Some people can have shitty posture and have pain. Some people can have great posture and have pain. So all permutations exist. We don't care so much of, does the research show X, Y, or Z? We care more that for this person it does. Okay, so if I have a client come to me and they've got really bad upper back posture and I do something to improve that and they feel better, that means postural deviation is important for that client. Very, very simple. If a client has poor posture and has pain, and we do something to change that intervention and it doesn't change their pain, it simply means it doesn't for that client. That's totally okay. The reason why we have all these tools is so we can move from one thing to the next and rule stuff out. So the common postural deviations we have are anterior and posterior pelvic tilt. Their bum is, either really arched or tucked under. They have upper cross syndrome where they're rounded in the shoulders and they've got long traps and rhomboids, really tight pecs. Lower cross syndrome, which is very similar to an anterior pelvic tilt, and it's all part of it. And scoliosis and any kind of lateral shift. So with postural deviations, I like to look at them because they do have an impact on movement and performance. So altered muscle activation, increased injury risk, decreased efficiency in movement patterns. a lot of people will argue posture doesn't matter, and then they'll do something like get you to bring your abs down by bracing and create a better, more intra-abdominal pressure by having your pelvic diaphragm and your respiratory diaphragm and your pelvic diaphragm face each other, creating a barrel because it gives you more stability. So for me, that kind of comes across as a little bit of a contradictory statement, because if it makes a difference in loaded exercise, why wouldn't it make a difference in unloaded everyday life? For me, it seems like it's kind of like a simple kind of question to ask. If your posture is off statically, it's going to be off dynamically, and why are we cueing it dynamically? Now, corrective strategies, we have mobility drills for restrictions. We strengthen weak areas and we retrain movement patterns. So we all know the type of stuff that you can do for that, but we can definitely go through a lot more over time. And once you figure out, like, this intervention does this, it will be something that you can use with clients very quickly. So if I have a client with a really, big lumbar lordosis and they get anterior hip pain, I might get them to do some lower abdominal activation exercises to bring the pelvis under, maybe a hip flexor stretch and a glute strengthening exercise. Take them through the exercise again, they feel better. And that does a couple of things. It deals with fear avoidance and perception of pain. They feel better, so they'll load that exercise up more and get better. So when people say this stuff's out of date and doesn't help, they're wrong. It's just that they just don't know how it helps, and they don't know how to apply it to the client in front of them, and they're just stuck in a philosophical framework rather than an actual results-based business that they want to have. Now, the under approach is a fun one. So it's letting someone back in. Cool. So the under, is that a question, Aiden, or? No, all good. Younger approach is basically made up of a couple of different ideas. We've got he identified these. Younger was a Czechoslovakian physiotherapist. It was neuromuscular muscle imbalances, and he came up with the upper and lower cross syndrome, and the muscles that were called phasic and tonic. So a tonic muscle is one that's prone to tightness, such as your rectus femoris or your pectoralis minor. Your phasic muscles are prone to weakness, such as your glutes and your lower traps. Okay, and we all kind of know from our clients that there's very common patterns that people have, and then we train them, they get better in every way. So we kind of all know that if we make our clients stronger in their glutes and their middle back, everything is good. It fixes things really, really quickly. We all know that there's some key exercises that most people could benefit from, right? It's not really rocket science there, and it's because of this concept of tonic versus phasic muscles. Now, upper cross syndrome is we see a bunch of stuff here. So we see inhibited deep cervical flexors, so the head drops forward. We see a facilitated sternocleidomastoid and pectoral, so we see an anterior migration of the head. We see upper trap and levator scapular facilitated, so we see a rounding of the shoulders like this, and we see inhibited lower, the mute mic for a second, lower trap and serratus anterior. So as soon as we pull these and get these muscles working better, the whole body comes back into place. For the lower body, we see inhibited lower abdominals in particular and obliques, facilitated rectus femoris and iliopsoas, so iliacus and psoas combined, facilitated thoracolumbar extensors, and inhibited, so the lumbar extensors are really working overtime, and inhibited glute med and max. So for clients, we know that most people could probably benefit from that, and we know that they could benefit from strengthening those areas. So pretty simple. We inhibit overactive muscles. The best way is to do a stretch. We strengthen the weaker muscles. Best way to do a strengthen. And then we reinforce proper movement. So this is where with corrective strategies, I've been saying for a long time, our corrective strategies don't actually solve problems. They create a window of opportunity for us to then reinforce proper movement and get strong in that new position. Okay. So this is where with Eden, for your work, like if you do soft tissue work, I'm all for it. Soft tissue work can be really, really good for a lot of people because A, it helps with their chronic workload. It can promote recovery. People just like it and they feel good. You can actually release some of these tonic muscles there and they subjectively feel better, which improves their biopsychosocial health, which is great. I would then argue that you need to then do some load work afterwards to strengthen the tissues that they need to strengthen to get better. So the best way to do it would be an integrated approach rather than, I just do soft tissue in the gym separate. If they can be combined, it's ideal. And a lot of we see this all the time with professional athletes. They always have physios doing strapping and stuff like that at games and doing rehab stuff for the clients. And then they go and they'll often lift weights and then they get back in the playing field because doing those exercises creates a window of opportunity. It's how I used to do it at my gym very, very successfully. Cool. Eden would argue that too. Good. Well, we can't have an argument then. We're both agreeing on the same thing. So it's boring. So now the next one is this now goes into our programming and where we put our load and how we want to manage it. And this is how we can basically shortcut our time. So one thing that happens to all coaches at some point, as we start building our library and our repertoire of stuff we can do to fix our clients and help them get better, we generally start to become overwhelmed and we start to program too much. I know I've done it many times. You try and put too much stuff in, and what you're doing is you're missing out on one of the most important considerations of program design, which is logistics. And logistics basically mean if a client hasn't got the equipment, hasn't got the time, and can't do what they need to do, then they simply won't do the thing. And then that becomes problematic. So we could do a whole bunch of stretches. We could do a whole bunch of activation exercises. We need to make sure we address logistics, but also adherence as well. And a lot of clients don't like doing their smaller rehab work, particularly if someone's a little bit stronger, okay, and has a little bit more training background. They don't love doing it. It's very hard for people to psychologically tie doing their rehab to the stuff they love. So there's a way we can get around it. Training in different muscle lengths. So we have tight muscles. We train in lengthened position. If we have weak muscles, so the phasic muscles, we train them in the shortened position, isometric glute bridges. And mid-range, we might just do that to maintain a training effect, okay? Because mid-range muscles rarely cause problems. So this is exactly the movement methodology that Athletic Troop Group uses, okay? They do, I know Noxie's done some of their stuff before, probably been exposed to it. Has anyone else just mentioned in the comments been exposed to ATG? Knees over toe guy and stuff like that? I'm sure most of us have. With ATG, their whole thing is literally looking at, this. So all their exercises, like lengthen position for tight muscles, all their front foot elevated split squat stuff, and other exercises basically work here. They do a whole bunch of muscle activation stuff. So they do a lot of 45-degree back extension work because that trains the back and the glutes in the short position. And mid-range don't really do a ton of that. So this method here fixes length tension relationship across force production and corrects imbalances by strengthening across full ranges. And generally what you find with this, okay, but this is Mike Israel doing a stupid bicep curl. I think it's a funny picture of like taking the lengthened position to too far a actual point where you can actually get a solid training effect. When we train in the lengthened position and emphasize those exercises for someone who's historically been very tight, we are addressing load management because we're shifting their exercises away from the part of the muscle, the muscular tendons insertion, all the areas where they've basically been loading up the whole time. So if I've got someone who has been doing really heavy squats, shit ton of heavy squats, and they start to get beat up, their hips are starting to get pinched up, their knees are getting sore, their lower back's getting sore. Cool. We've probably all been there at some point, right? Our load is moving into the excessive load thing, particularly as we get stronger. We're overtraining. We've probably gone past overreaching and we're using excessive load risk. So if you get a strong person, this can very much happen very quickly, right? As soon as we change to our lengthened position exercises, we change our exercises to things like front foot elevated split squats, sissy squats, and all those types of exercises. We've shifted our load off those mid-range tissues and put it into lengthened positions. When we change our exercises, what happens to the overall load we use? Decreases. When we go from bilateral to unilateral exercises, what happens to the load we use? Decreases. What becomes our limiting factor? The strength of our muscles or the actual ability of our joints to go through a range of motion? Our joints to go through that range of motion. So what happens really, really quickly and really, really effectively is we basically move people from this red zone into the green zone. Now, what happens, and this is where a lot of people kind of don't actually think this is possible, is you can actually still reach into this red zone doing unilateral exercises and rehab exercises or softer exercises. Someone on this call right now who speaks a lot tore his hamstring doing like single leg exercise because I took it into the excessive load zone relative for my function. And I had PB'd 2 exercises before that for legs. So like I was feeling all good and pumped up, but basically it was excessive load. So I went into the wrist zone, my hamstring went. Whereas if I managed it around here and kept the load the same, I wouldn't have had a problem. I wouldn't have torn it, and I probably would have hit that load repeatedly by now. Because the thing with injuries is you have to then come back and then get stronger again. So this happens. So for a lot of people, if they've been doing training a certain way, simply shifting the exercises to train the same muscles, same joints, but in different positions, lengthened or shortened, can be a really good way to get someone out of pain really quickly for that. You may not be solving the problem, but you're creating a perception that you solve the problem. And that for a lot of clients is just as important in the short term because then they buy into exactly what you do. So is this all making sense so far? Just if you've got a question, put it in the box. Okay. So this here is what we're not going to worry too much about this last one. Like this is just the psychosocial stuff. So all the things that you can put into a rehab situation for a client. So nutrition stuff, protein, anti-inflammatories, hydration, sleep and recovery, stress and cortisol, and physiological variability and individuality, such as genetic disposition, so rheumatoid arthritis, for example, or hormones, etc. This type of stuff we're not going to worry about. This is kind of like the principles that I kind of remind myself of every single time I talk to a client or try and remind myself on them as a way to kind of like develop their program over time once I've used all these to assess where they are and what they need to do. First one is I want to provide movement options. Okay, encourage variability to reduce overuse and improve adaptability. The vast majority of injuries happen because one tissue is doing too much work. Very simple. If one tissue is doing too much work, whatever's doing too much work will break, and that will cause problems. Okay, so we need to encourage movement options. So the ATG group stuff that I talked about just before provides movement options. It gives people new stuff to do. So movement options also give someone a high degree of psychological safety in the program. Of course, they can still maintain the training effect, feel better, and get better at whatever their desired activity is. So this one here, load management, keeps them moving. Principle 2, coordinate movement options, i.e. movement competency, develop stability, control and fluidity in movement patterns. This is actually assessing the gender approach, assessing their movement links and fascial lines, assessing these joint by joint to then make sure you shift the load into the tissues that you need to have it in. Okay. So again, like if you got someone who's, example today, I helped someone today at the gym with the belt squat. They were shifting their hips back really far and they're feeling it in their lumbar spine. What I did is I changed their movement competency and shifted the option. And then that took away the pain from the hip and the lumbar spine just by shifting the performance of it. So I changed where the load was basically used or where the load was managed and pushed it into the quads, which is what the belt squat is unreal for. Pain-free, could train with a high degree of confidence, and then they develop stability control in that movement pattern. They get better over the long term. I know it's quite a deep call, which is why I'm recording it and posting it again, so everyone can kind of go over it. Because this stuff, when you start thinking about it, it makes life so much easier to solve problems for people. Now, next one is amplification and dissipation of force. Okay, so optimize force transfer and reduce impact stress, e.g. plyometrics. What I mean by this is it a problem with creating force or absorbing force? What causes more pain because that creates more of a solution? So for example, if I have pain going up the stairs, I have a problem with force production because you don't really, when you're going upstairs, you don't really have a whole bunch of eccentric load. You don't really have much at all. If I have pain going down the stairs, I have a problem with eccentric load because then you have to decelerate as you go down the stairs so you don't topple down the whole thing. This is one of the reasons why uphill sprinting is a really, really good exercise for someone to get like a nice anaerobic ATP PC stimulus in, because what will happen is when they go up the hill, because the hill is like this, for example, when they step, they get much less eccentric stress. So for someone who wants to, train like that, it works well. All right. So we look at that type of stuff, and you can change how you do it based on the actual tissue that's been targeted. So for example, if the tendon is the tissue that's been targeted, they have a tendon issue, what we do is we go to isometrics, sorry. If a tendon needs more stiffness, we move to plyometrics. And you can learn a whole bunch of ways to actually learn how to do with all these things. And it makes life really interesting because you can come up with some really cool strategies for people. Now from there, yeah.
With the whole stair thing, stair runs at the stadium is usually a common thing for like footy training for preseason and that.
Yep.
Is it better to be trying to put the effort in up or down, or is both going to be okay due to the running that they do anyway for footy, or what's it?
Good question. So downstairs or down the stairs at footy, down stadium stairs, is a shit ton of force absorption.
So they're better off going slow down the stairs, fast up, yeah?
Yep, absolutely. Because like you're not really going to. So we look at the deceleration. Deceleration happens, that's fine, but you're not really decelerating to change direction. Like in football, you're decelerating to change direction or stop on a dime. This is your decelerating just enough to stop yourself from falling face first down the stairs.
Yeah, okay.
And that eccentric strain causes, or eccentric stress, and I talk about this on Friday in a lot more detail, any eccentric work causes far more tissue damage. The more tissue damage you incur, the worse your recovery is going to be because you've obviously got more to recover from. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So like for in-season footy stuff, like one of the things I want to do with you is a whole bunch of like sled work in season, because the sled work is pretty much 95% concentric only. Deadlifts, for example, like we don't want to have slow controlled phases on a deadlift in the footy season, because when we do the slow controlled deadlift, what do? That heavy eccentric load is really hard to recover from. So you'd actually just deadlift and drop the weight. So much fun, right? So generally what I'll do is I will look at where the person's recovery ability is and try and minimize as much eccentric work as possible in most cases, unless it's a specific like powerlifting type environment where someone, is struggling to control the weight down, for example. So for footy, go uphill hard. So that's going to give you the acceleration with least amount of joint strain. Go down the stairs with just control, and you'll be much better off.
Yeah. Okay.
I think anyway. Now, next one is enhanced metabolic capacity. So with that, it's basically we want to improve tissue resilience through conditioning. I think for metabolic capacity, we can address that in quite a few different ways. We certainly want to have a like a cardiovascular capacity, because any kind of ATP regeneration makes injuries faster to recover from. But you want to do reps. You want to actually train this injured tissue. A lot of people who get injured, they never train the injured tissue again, and then it gets more and more injured. So with your back knocks, just as an example, like if you do some deadlifts or something like that and you feel your back muscles working hard, I don't care. Like I'm not going to get, it's not that I don't care. It's just that I won't be particularly stressed about it, because, all right, cool, you need to train that tissue. It needs to get stronger. And a lot of people, when they do training again, they train into muscle, like, shit, this hurts and it burns. I'm like, yeah, so it fucking should. Like you need to get there. So like, you know how you've done the hamstring bridges with me?
Yeah.
Cool. If you torn your hamstring, for example, you would do a shit ton of them. And they would be really, really useful for improving the metabolic capacity of the hamstring muscle, and that isometric hold would be really good for the tendon. So cool. We would basically be improving the tissue resilience through conditioning. Now, principle 5, expose to greater challenges. Now, we all know what this is. Basically, get better at what you do over a period of time. That's it. So, more demanding loads and movement complexity, that will give us progressive overload. If we do progressive overload, we will see, we do need to do progressive overload, because if we're under training, we increase our risk. If we're optimal load, we decrease our risk. If we're excessive load, we explosively accelerate our risk. So progressive overload is actually a strategy to decrease risk of getting hurt. And this is where we see something like someone's doing the same thing they always did. They run the same distance every single week with the same with the same speed. They just do their very basic strategies. Like cardiovascular metabolically, that's all fine. What happens over a period of time is it actually leads to undertraining and they get a risk. So it's kind of like you always need to progress yourself in training to minimize your risk as much as possible if you're going to do anything athletic, because you have this kind of window that you sit in where you're actually going to have the most resilience against injuries. And if you're undertraining, what will happen is you come into a force that you can't handle. If you're overtraining, you simply will just you'll come into a force that you can't handle because you can't recover from the impact. So there's always this balancing act that you need to target. Not wrong window. My bad. So always have graded challenges. And we look at ATG group, pardon me, because they do a lot of things right. They give people targets to set. They give people targets all the time. And those targets are really good because it gives people something to aim for and go for graded challenges. Now, could you do more than their targets? Possibly, probably. Is it worthwhile? Most of the time, probably. But the whole idea that they have standards to get you to go through graded challenges is really, really good because it improves strength. And then the final principle is cultivate self-optimism and communication. So mindset and self-belief play a key role. This is how I communicate to someone. So if someone has hurt themselves, for example, and during a deadlift, or someone's lifting a deadlift, right? And their form doesn't look too pretty. Okay. If I look at them and go, whoa, if you lift like that, you're going to tear your back. That's going to cause, fear avoidance. It's going to cause perception of pain to be increased. They're going to be starting to look for injuries. It's going to decrease their confidence. It's going to decrease their mindset. It's going to be a problem. So we don't want to do that. What we want to do is we want every communication is framed in a positive framework. Okay. So, cool, you lifted that. Let's improve you. Let's change this around so we can make you lift even more. How's that sound? So everything needs to be framed as positive as possibly in these situations there. And what happens, that develops that self-efficacy that someone needs to get the results that they want to get. And when someone has a high degree of self-efficacy and confidence in what you do as a coach and what they do as an athlete, you get heaps better buy-in. You get people who actually want to do the work, which is always like a fun thing. Like we've all had clients who don't do shit right, and it's frustrating as hell. And if someone comes in and they rehab and they feel confident about how their rehab is going to go and how they can overcome it, they generally have a better clinical outcome. There's a lot of research saying that if someone's going in for a surgery, as long as they meet their surgeon beforehand, they actually have a better outcome in their surgery every single time. Well, not every single time, but they have a much higher likelihood of having a positive outcome. So why wouldn't we kind of take advantage of this? If it works in something as powerful as surgery, we may as well use it in our clinical practice to, help people get the best possible outcomes out of everything. So every time I'm coaching someone in real life, which like admittedly isn't all the time, everything is framed in a positive way to avoid all these fear avoidance patterns and everything else that you do. And if you can do that, you make your life heaps better for your clients. So guys, to recap, this is how we apply it. Remember these principles as part of our programming options for moving forward over time. When we assess our clients and talk to them about their problems, so this is talk phase, we look at the psychosocial model and we try and understand as much about that person as we can. Can't really argue with it. It's a best practice for every situation that you could be in, right? Understand your client. Then we look at load management. Look at, where are they weak? Where are they strong? Where have they done too much? Are they under recovered? Are they over recovered? There's a ton of things that you can kind of look at with load management. Okay. From there, then what we do is we go in through all these different formulas here, the joint by joint, movement, slings, postural, Yonder approach, and strength, all these four, to see what do we need to help biomechanically for that client to get the best outcomes for them so they feel better. Very, very wordy, but in concept, that's actually quite simple. Okay, what's wrong and what do we need to fix it? From there, how can we adjust our strength training to tick these boxes as much as we can with having the least amount of interruption to the clients, least interruption to the clients logistically, so they can train with the shortest period of time to get the best results. And from there, when we remember all these things for our program design, we always speak to them in a way that's very, very positive to ensure that they feel good about everything that they're doing. And when we do that, then they're generally going to get better clinical outcomes regardless. What questions do we have, team? A lot there we covered. Cool. We don't have questions. It's fine. I won't get angry. So we're going to go over each of these things in more detail again, particularly biopsychosocial and load management in coming weeks, just to really make sure we can understand the questioning and the lines of process that we can work with clients. So what I recommend in the coming weeks is you actually bring client case studies to calls so we can actually, or yourself, I don't actually mind, like if you're having a problem, may as well fix it. Like as long as we fix someone, it's a good call, right? I think it's very beneficial. So we can actually do these things in practice. And when we can start doing them practically, we're going to get much better outcomes for everyone involved. Cool, guys. Namaste. Thank you for your attention and listening. And I will see you guys tomorrow for the AMA.
Cheers.
Speak soon.
Thanks, bro.